want you to think about a company whose services you pay for. Your utilities company, an insurance company, a phone company, something like that. Got one? And I want you to remember a time when they frustrated you. They got something wrong, they didn't follow through, they provided bad service, they dropped the ball. And as customers, we hate that, right? And those companies have a small window to make things right with us. So let's imagine that they send you an apology email. They have a couple of options of how to go about this. First option, fairly relaxed, quite personal, something like this. Hey, Shelly, we're sorry we got the date wrong for setting up the internet at your new home. Not like this happened recently or anything. We know that was really inconvenient. Thanks for letting us know about the mistake so we could fix it. We'll do our best to make sure it doesn't happen again. Thanks, your favourite internet provider. Or they have a second option, something in a more formal, businessy kind of voice because they want to sound more professional. Dear valued customer, it is with regret that we write to express our apologies for the recent error, not our recent error. There was an unavoidable disruption within our system due to a service upgrade. We apologise for any inconvenience this may have caused. Are you feeling all warm and fuzzy? Because it's the classic non-apology, and it's what the formal business voice lends itself to. They may as well have signed off with, sorry, not sorry, because that's pretty much how it feels. We can all see it, we can feel it, we can hear it. It's practically impossible to sound human, genuine, in a formal business written voice. So I want to say this to you. The formal business voice, it's dead. Like, dead. There is no longer any place for it in business today. I cannot find a single time when it's useful, except if you want to threaten someone. If you want to threaten someone, go ahead and use a formal written voice. Should the undersigned not comply immediately with the aforementioned conditions herewith, blah, blah, blah. If you want to threaten or alienate or put the fear of God or the courts into someone, go ahead and use the formal business voice. If you want to do pretty much anything else on the planet, use a conversational written voice. I don't know if you've heard of Alan Siegel, but he's made a career out of taking legal documents and simplifying them, and yet retaining all of the legal weight and power. I mention this because it's one of the most common arguments that I hear. If we write in a conversational voice, Shelly, it won't stand up in court. Always non-lawyers saying this to me, by the way. And Alan Siegel describes his work as a means to empathy, clarity, and transparency, building the humanity into communications. And I love that, because that right there is my issue with the formal business voice and why I say it's dead. It removes the humanity. It takes out the people, the we, the us, the you, and instead it shifts to this kind of third-person generic, the user, the client. It's cold and it's clinical. And it also removes responsibility and accountability. We've all heard it, the classic butt-covering corporate voice. Mistakes were made. Nobody made them. They just happened like magic. Or my favourite, because pretty much all of us have done it at some stage, it is recommended. If you've written that, put your hand up. Go on, I know you have. It is recommended. If you ever wrote an essay at university or a report at work, it is recommended. Right. I'm like, by whom? The universe? It just is. So I want to tell you how I learned about this stuff. Because I had been a writer for 20 years. Master's degree, published author, all that jazz. And like most writers, I had been trained to use a wide vocab, sculpted sentences, a thesaurus. I do love me a good thesaurus. Are you with me? Yeah, we like our words. Good writers love words, and we use them a lot. I also really believed that there were some times when the formal voice was absolutely required. You probably believe that too. That there are times when we need to use a voice that sounds academic or legal or authoritative, and that in order to do that, we have to use a formal writing approach. Now, I was on Great Barrier Island with my family, because that's where my whānau's from, and we had hired a man called Victor Main to write a document for us. Now, this document has legislative power. It sits under the Resource Management Act, and it gives my hapu a voice in everything that's going on in the region. And we had come together to look at a draft of this document. It had been emailed to me, by the way, but I hadn't opened it. And here's why. I fully expected that it was going to be long and boring and hard to wade my way through and very official looking and lots of text. And that's what happens with formal documents. Is that what happens with you? Take it home with a glass of wine. Enjoy yourself. It's great stuff. But when someone handed me a printed copy of that document, and it was much shorter than I was expecting, it was about 20 pages, and I started flicking through it. It was 20 pages long. It was much shorter than I was expecting. I thought it was going to look like that. I started flicking through it, and it was easy to read, and it was easy to skim through, and it was easy to understand, and even more than that, I could see myself in that. I could see my whānau in that. And that blew my mind, because at the same time as sounding really human and easy for anyone from my teenagers to my nana to understand, it was going to have all of this legal weight. And until that moment, I didn't know such a thing was possible. Everything in my career up until that point led me to believe that that wasn't the case. Now that signaled a shift for me. Since that moment, I've trained hundreds of people every year to stop using the formal written businessy voice and instead to write in a more authentic voice. Because the formal business voice wastes so much time. Not the least of which is because it takes a long time to write it, a long time to read it, it's very waffly. Formal equals waffly. I challenge you to find me a formal document that doesn't use more words than is necessary to get the point across. Bring it. I'll give you my email address after. Instead of using that boring, time-wasting voice, I've now trained people to use an authentic conversational voice. The way that we talk to each other and express our ideas really naturally. That translates very well into writing. And I have them just get rid of all of that waffle. And I give them examples and help them see the issues that they're having when they're writing. Now, can I tell you what I've learned about why we do this to ourselves? Why we write things that are so freaking painful to write and even worse to read? It's about perception. Perception on a couple of levels. First of all, we are really worried when we write stuff and send it out into the world, whether it's an email or a report for your boss or whatever, you hit send, that is a vulnerable experience. What is someone going to think? Am I going to look bad? Am I going to look good? Am I going to look stupid? Because we worry about that. So perception on that level. And then a second part of perception, which is this idea that we have that we can't quite nail down the reasons why, the perception that they want it written this way. Who's they? Because they have got a hell of a lot of bad writing to answer for, I got to tell you. Is they your governance board? Because when I ask them if they want to do more reading than they have to, they say, hell no. Is they a government department who your organisation is answerable to? Because they pay me good money to train them to not be overly formal and not be waffly and not write in a formal voice. They don't want to read you being waffly and overly formal. And I guess there's a third element of perception too, in that so many of us spent all these years at university and tens of thousands of dollars having the perception drilled into us that academic writing equals good writing.
Oh, hell yeah!
It doesn't. It does equal the kind of writing that's required in that context. And before all of the academics in the room, except for my friend over here, crucify me, because I can feel some glares. Of course you can have good academic writing. Of course you can. It's just that unfortunately, as we all know, a lot of the time it's not done well. So let me show you some examples. Stop talking about it, let you see what it looks like for yourself. This is from a credit card agreement from a bank in Abu Dhabi. Have fun reading that. Did you give up after 3 lines? Because you just, honestly, you go, the card may be blah, 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 turn the page. That's pretty much what we do when we read that. I have a version of this type of content written by Alan Siegel, and it's from a 1-page credit card agreement. This one's 65 pages long. Did I mention that? I wish I could take credit for that, Alan Siegel, a 1-page credit card agreement. So let me ask you this. If you had those 2 documents side by side and you had to sign one, which one would you feel more comfortable signing? If you had to read through one of them before you signed it, which one would you want to read through? If you had to have a discussion with the company who wrote that document, if you needed to negotiate something or you were having a problem, which company would you feel comfortable going to? Which company would you trust more? I love the answers. It's good. Let me give you another example, and I'm very sorry, Hamilton City Council, to throw you under the bus, but you did this to yourselves. This was in the newspaper earlier this year, and it's not a one-off. I'm not going to read that to you. Do you just take the information in really quickly and easily, first glance? You don't have to read anything twice. I had to read it a couple times. Can I tell you that it could have been written like this? Now, writing it like this does not make it less formal. Sorry, it does not make it less official. It's clearly less formal. It doesn't make it less legally binding. It doesn't make it less professional. It's still an official notice, ticking a box, doing what it needs to do, but it is far more likely to be read and to be understood. And there is no reason why we can't be writing like that. And many, many good organisations are doing it. What I'm talking about here is called plain language or plain English, and it's been around for a really long time. It's not new. And we know some things about a written conversational voice as opposed to the formal business voice. We know from decades of research, it is shorter. It uses far fewer words. It's more engaging. It's easier and faster for your brain to process information presented in a conversational voice than in a formal voice. And interestingly enough, the conversational voice de-escalates situations because the formal business voice sounds like a pompous ass. And that is the last thing that you want to do when tensions are high, right? If you are mad at that company that made that mistake, and they send you a pompous-sounding email, that does not fix your problem. Plain language or plain English, it's being used all around the world. It's, like I said, it's not new. It's used in situations where things are life and death and where important information is vital to get to a wide audience. It's used by the Federal Aviation Administration, the aerospace and defence industry. It's used by the World Health Organization, the Centers for Disease Control. It's used by many governments all around the world to varying levels of success, but they're trying. It's very hard to change our traditions and change our perceptions. There are US appellate court judges doing amazing work in this space. Now, I've seen nods. I've heard some cheering me on, some, yes, Shelly, you're sitting in the choir seats, maybe feeling a little bit preached to. Who's with me? Like, yep, we're with you. No arguments here. Excellent. because I have a message specifically for you. In my trainings, I get to this point where everyone's like, yep, cool, we know we need to do this, this is what we want to see, and then someone pulls out their own document and they look at it and go, oh, but this one has to be written formally. So I want to talk to you about this thing that I call our writer switch. And it's something that we develop in our brain as we learn how to write and to express our ideas. So all through schooling, we develop this thing that I call our writer switch. And as we go throughout every day in our lives, it's turned off. And as soon as you pick up a pen or put your fingers on a keyboard, it turns on. Instantly, just like that. You're not aware of it. You don't know that it's happening. You don't choose to make it happen. It's been trained into us. And what happens when we flick that switch is that a drawer in the filing cabinet of your brain opens up. And that drawer is full of all of the rules that you ever learned about what makes good writing. All of the rules, all of the conventions, all of the do's and don'ts, all of the worries and fear and anxiety about getting it right, those all instantly flood our minds. And there's something else that happens, and this is what's really intriguing to me. When you flick on that writer switch, your reader self, the one who raised their hand a moment ago, the one who's been nodding, that reader self leaves the room. It's like your reader self and your writer self have never met. Because you're like, okay, now I'm writing. There are things I must do when I'm writing, and you ignore all of the things that your reader self wants about documents that are easy to read and fast to understand and process, easy to find the answers, documents that have the answers early on instead of making you wade through lots of preamble. All of those things, they leave the room. So my advice to you, in order to help you try and keep that writer switch turned off, is this. Write like a reader. Not a writer. Write like a reader, because your reader self does not want to read formal documents. Are you ready to be insulted? Because I don't know if anyone's done that for you yet today. I have to tell you, you're not special. Look, a whole room full of not friends. Okay, fine, you're special. But you're not an exception to this rule. The things that you want as a reader, because you're busy and because you've got lots of stuff to read, your readers that you are writing for, they want those same things. You can trust that. And I think that somehow we think that each one of us individually is an exception to that rule. Like, oh, I'm a lazy reader, I like bullet points, whatever. We all do. There's research to support that. So write like a reader. Write like a human, because the formal business voice is dead. It's fossilized, it's shriveled. You're not. Kia ora.